Hey everybody, welcome to the Fraud Prevention Roundtable series. My name is Alexander Hall. I'm the owner of Dispute Defense Consulting and the host of the Fraud Prevention Roundtable series. Today, I'm excited to have with me Mr. Alex Zeltcer from nSure.ai. We are going to discuss the topic of digital assets and how to secure them, what the strategy looks like, how things differ between physical goods, digital goods, and everything in between. So in a second here, I'm going to go ahead and allow Alex to introduce himself. But during that time, I'm going to ask everybody to tell us where you're calling in from, what industry you're in, maybe what company you're with, and any questions that you might have about digital assets. With that, Alex, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks a lot, Alexander. It's a pleasure to be there, and happy to be on your show. I've been fighting fraud for a while now. Most of it, with nSure.ai, but even before that, with the company called Zig, it was a gift card marketplace. Gift cards are notorious for attracting significant amounts of fraudsters, primarily the digital ones. So we've had our share of that, fighting that for, I want to say, probably 5-6 years. Have been in that neighborhood for a while, and prior to that, I've held a few different executive positions with both startup companies and corporates.
That's awesome. Been all over the place. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So kicking this off, tell us how digital assets are fitting into the marketplace. Tell us why it's being adopted so widely across the entire global marketplace. What some aspects look like. Yeah, let's just get right into it.
Sure, and obviously looking at that from the fraud prevention perspective primarily, and not just the adoption of digital, but I think that digital in general and digital assets primarily are being adopted faster and faster in the recent years. I think that the biggest revolution that we've seen probably a few decades ago was of media, music, and video streaming, etc. That all went digital. Except for maybe playing records that I still do at home. I have to admit, I think the last time anyone has bought a CD was a while ago. So vinyl is still there, but for I think emotional reasons and not practical ones. I think that's true for other aspects of the digital world as well. And we've seen a lot of change taking place in the travel industry, in airlines, in gift cards, in debit cards, in crypto lately, in the NFTs. So we're seeing more and more, I would say, categories of products that we used to think of as not necessarily digital becoming digital. We're seeing that in games, obviously, as well. And we're seeing very interesting phenomena and very interesting fraud, I would say, patterns that evolve around these. And what's important, I think, to understand is to understand the reasoning behind it. So when you think about fraudsters, and when you think about how they go about their business, and you think about what's their business model, generally speaking, and here we're speaking primarily about payment fraud and not other types, even though we'll probably touch upon other types later on. When you look at payment fraud, fraudsters that do this as a business, they go on the dark web, they buy a list of stolen financials, and this could be a list of stolen credit card information or bank accounts or PayPal or whatever. And then what they need to do is really turn that into more cash, right? That's their return on investment. And the way to do that is to buy stuff and sell it. And, I don't think I need to explain why buying and reselling 1,000 iPhones is very different than buying and reselling 1,000, game codes for Xbox, right? That's not the same thing. And I think that that's what we're seeing evolve. We're seeing that in some products more than others. For instance, we're not seeing that in media. We're not seeing that in music almost at all. And the reason that we're not seeing that is that there's no way that you as a fraudster would be able to sell a song to anyone. Right? They won't buy it off your hands. But if you're selling a game on Xbox, a code for that, if you're selling a gift card that they can, that people can use in store or online, if you're selling crypto, if you're selling NFTs, there's no reason people won't buy that from you. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the combination of the immediate delivery and the liquidity being what really attracts the fraudsters. The combination of, the fastest delivery plus the best liquidity is what creates the ranking. So, the highest ranking products that we've ever seen are prepaid debit cards, right? A prepaid Visa card is the most sought after. And then, I think in a kind of a sliding scale, the next one is probably gift cards, but primarily the very liquid ones. So Walmart, Amazon, these types.
Sure.
Then it comes to crypto. Crypto is probably the next one after that. And then there's a sliding scale that goes on to games, to travel, to all of these type of products. And we're seeing very, very different fraud patterns than we're used to from the e-commerce days of a decade or two ago. And we're seeing fraud patterns that are extremely scalable. Because again, if you put yourself in in the fraudster's shoes, what they're looking for is a means to utilize that list of stolen financials very fast, very quickly, right? Because once they start utilizing that list, someone's going to realize that they've got their hands on one, and they're going to block it. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, they need to be done within sometimes hours, mostly minutes. So they need to figure out if they can find a service that they can attack, a service that sells these type of or transfers these type of assets, whether these are crypto exchanges, NFT marketplaces, the vanilla gift cards site by Visa, different marketplaces for games. They identify that, they find a hole, and then they attack scalably. The attacks, from what we've seen, are looking more and more like DDoS, like distributed denial of service. It's like a group of seemingly legitimate individuals that are all coming in there. They're not trying to crash your servers. They're just trying to suck up all of your inventory, which is, which when you think about it is insane, but that's what works for them. And right. And that's what we need to fight in this digital age, in this digital arena.
So it's huge. You gave us a lot of information. Thank you. Let's pull out some ideas there. So one, when we typically think about fraud, we think about somebody buying something with stolen payment details, right? It's a pretty straightforward process, whether it's a TV, a phone, or a pair of shoes. They buy the thing, and then they have to go figure out a way to cash out on it, go sell it somewhere. By effectively buying all of these gift cards and all of these game codes and all of these instant delivery digital assets, they're able to engage with these marketplaces where it's commonplace to be selling these codes. So they have a reliable way to liquidate and cash out on all of these things that they buy, all these codes and all the gift cards and all the Robux, what is it? The Roblox bucks. Yeah. My daughter just started getting into that. So we see the instant and reliable transmission of all of these goods going across the board. And we also see a rise in leveraging marketplaces, peer-to-peer marketplaces, which also can result in scams, so on and so forth. You never know how these things are going to be verified when you're buying them on these peer-to-peer marketplaces. Crypto accounts are used in a similar fashion to the way that bank accounts are being used, by depositing funds, transferring funds, making mule accounts, things like that. Or ATOing established accounts and funding crypto accounts. A lot of the same technologies and a lot of the same methodologies are using there. So it's a wide network that there isn't a lot of attention being given to, and I think that's a really powerful point. The other thing that you touched on during one of our last conversations was the anonymity that comes along with the gift cards, with the prepaid cards, and with the crypto accounts. Let's talk to that a little bit and see why that separates digital assets in those categories apart from traditional e-commerce.
Yeah, so I think that when you're shopping on Home Depot or you're shopping on Amazon, you're used to providing them with an address, with a physical address they can deliver the goods to. You would provide them with a real phone that they can text to let you know when this is going to be delivered, etc. Right? That's a means of communication. You're going to provide them with an email address that you monitor because you want to know when this is going to arrive. You want to be able to do stuff about it. That's not the case for when you're buying crypto, right? You're buying crypto. You went into your account, you bought the crypto, it's in your wallet, it's done. There's no reason for you to provide any additional information. And you normally don't want to. Same is true for games. Even if you're playing on Steam, you're not providing Steam with the real, information of who you are. You're providing an avatar information, right? You have an identity that is created primarily for that. That's what we're seeing today more and more on these digital asset type type services and goods. We're seeing people that are keeping their identity behind the scenes on these, not because they are trying to commit fraud and not because they are bad actors, but because simply this is the way it's done, right? You create an avatar that you're playing on Steam. You're not going to use the same email address for buying crypto that you're using to buy in Home Depot. And same is true even for prepaid debit cards, right? You're going on a site. There's no need for a delivery address. There's no need for any of that. You're buying a gift for someone. You're okay providing their email address because the gift card needs to get somewhere, right? It has to be delivered somewhere. There's no reason for you to provide any other pieces of information. And for from a fraudster perspective, this is paradise, right? Because consumers have forced the different merchants to create a frictionless experience, or at least they're trying to create a frictionless experience without going through email verification or phone verification or even KYC in some cases. So they're trying to avoid that because they know the consumers don't like that. From a fraudster perspective, it's great. That's the best case scenario, right? They don't have to provide any information, get their hands on goods they can resell, and get the liquidity. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing, because of the adoption of these digital assets and these digital transferable devices, we're seeing more and more anonymity that surrounds it, not because of bad actors, but simply because there's no need for it. And once there's no need for it, clearly asking for it and verifying it creates friction. If we can do without it, consumers would shop better, merchants would be happier. That's a combination that creates that situation.
Absolutely. The Amazon model that everyone's pursuing is actually feeding this to be successful. The low friction, low verification, all of these items that everyone demands, the one-click the one tap payment and all this stuff, the very easy, low friction environments are actually supporting the growth of this across the marketplace. Those are great points.
Exactly.
So with that, so we've spoken about what makes it different. We've spoken about the through lines between traditional e-commerce and then what traditional e-commerce is experiencing and is both driving forward this type of fraud. With all of that, let's talk about, we can start moving into strategy items, right? You mentioned to me that if we're dealing in the digital space, it's important, first of all, just across the board, it's important that we understand there's a lot of trust and faith being given without effective fraud prevention. There's a lot of trust being given with what's typed into a form. And with that, it's important for everybody here to understand the difference between a digital identity and a physical one. For a lot of people, this will be recap, but it's very important to really drill down on these fundamentals. So you mentioned to me that identities are different within the digital space. Let's drill down on that a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. So I think, and again, from a fraud prevention perspective, if you look at the e-commerce, that started in the 90s, identity verification was the basis everybody used for preventing fraud. Because the one thing you wanted to verify is that the person behind the transaction is the rightful owner of the payment instrument, whether that's a credit card or a bank account or a PayPal. If you know that the person using it is the rightful owner, you're safe. That's common sense. And as a result of that, all of the platforms created in these days, late 90s, beginning of 2000s, and even beyond that, were primarily concerned with identity verification. And these are tools that, that have billions of people listed and billions of devices that they can track and fingerprint and billions of email addresses that they can link to different personalities and generally create what they call this identity that you can trust, you as a merchant can trust, or sometimes mistrust, right? They can identify, bad actors that way as well. And that's all good when it comes to e-commerce, because there are certain elements within e-commerce for physical goods that you have to keep, right? You have to keep a physical address. If there's no physical address, you cannot get the stuff delivered. And you're using an email address that you are constantly monitoring, as we've just discussed. When you go into the digital space, it's no longer the case. It's no longer the case, and it's even more than that. People don't use the same identity when they go play a game on Steam, when they buy crypto, or when they shop at Home Depot. These are different identities they're using. That's natural to them, switching these different identities in these different domains, especially when we talk more and more about the millennials and the Z generation. That's the way they interact with the different systems. And as a result of that, identity verification simply fails. And it's not that it only fails, it would create lots of what we call false positives, because they look at an identity that they don't recognize it as part of their physical world experience. The person is now using his avatar that he's using in games to purchase a game on a marketplace, and that does not correspond with any identity that they've ever seen, shopping on Amazon. Even if they know everybody that shops on Amazon, like let's say 90% of the consumer population in the US, simply doesn't mean that they know even 10% of the people shopping on different gaming sites. And as a result of that, you have to strategize differently. You have to realize that just relying on identity verification and trying to use identity verification as a means for fraud prevention is going to fail you. And it's going to fail you in both directions. One, you're not going to identify the fraudsters. And two, which is even worse, you're going to identify the legitimate users as fraudsters as a result of that. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that in the marketplace. And that is something that we are fighting hard, both to make sure that people understand that, because it's an issue for the market, regardless of of nSure, right? Regardless of the service we're providing, it's preventing the markets from growing. It prevents some of these services from growing faster, because they're declining. Good shoppers, they're declining. They're getting them to the site, and then eventually they get declined. So we've been fighting this for a while to try and get both an understanding around the table when we speak to our clients, but also working with other vendors and other partners we have to understand that this paradigm we have of identity verification fails, and we need something else in its place. And I can share with you a little bit about what we're doing as different strategies and what we've seen being done by other services as well. And I think that they all eventually end up utilizing behavioral analytics. Some of them are using behavioral analytics in a very, I would say, small scale, and some are using them in a larger scale. So let me talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
What we've seen is, when I'm babbling too long, you just stop me and ask another question, right?
Sure, but I love everything you're saying. It's great stuff.
All right. So you can use biometrics. You can use device fingerprinting. You can use specific behaviors to identify specific persons, even to identify account takeovers. This is what we call the one-offs, right? You can use that to identify a single session that is wrong or that is behaving differently than it should, right? And if you're tracking everything that's going on your site, and you're seeing someone coming in and now his behavior has changed. Behavior can be, it takes him longer to go between different pages, or it takes him faster. And he's buying stuff that he didn't buy before. He's changed his purchasing habits and all of that. You can identify ATOs using that. That's, I think, stuff everybody does, or to a certain degree, right? It's as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of common sense. The part that is more complicated to do, and we see a lot of failures there in the market, is tracking these scalable fraud attacks. So we put ourselves back, in the fraudster shoes, and they have this list of stolen financials. They need to go at it fast and attack a site, and we're seeing a pattern that is, like a distributed denial of service, meaning lots of different individuals, but they all seem legitimate. Right? If you're not using identity verification, by the way, if you are using identity verification, it's even harder. If you're not using identity verification, you're seeing different entities coming in. There's no reason to think that they're fraudsters, and you need to find a way to link them. And the easiest way to link them is by tracking the very, very, I would say, granular behaviors. I'll give you an example which is fairly easy to understand, but obviously it's just it's just a niche. Let's say you are tracking the time it takes, or the length of time a person hesitates before he puts a product in the cart. And let's say you see a session of a user coming in and he's hesitating for 15.3 seconds. Okay, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's okay, it's normal. Now, second later, you see another one coming in and he's hesitating 15.3 seconds as well. Okay, on the fifth, you can say, okay, I'm seeing a pattern emerging. But for you to be able to do that, you need to track that, and you need to be able to track that, and not individually and say whether 15.3 is good or bad, but realize that in the context of 5 sessions in a very short time that all hesitated for a similar amount of time over a very close amount of time, you can link them together and say, oh, they look to be all coming in from different locations, using different devices, different countries, whatever, but really they are the same link. They are the same group of individuals. Yes. They're a machine, right? Or you don't necessarily find that, right? It's not necessarily that you can say I can do proxy piercing and see that it is all coming from one device. Bot detection is not necessarily gonna find them. And if you do that, believe me, if you're selling prepaid debit cards, they'll get around that too. The one-off pieces that you're trying to figure out. It's only when you're looking at tens of thousands of different elements very granularly are you able to identify these type of rings in a way that makes it very difficult for the fraudster to prevent being discovered. And we found that these types of behavioral analytics and anomaly detections across the board, not on a single transaction, but for the marketplace itself, sometimes even across different merchants in similar domains, is where we gain significant value, I think, from the investment we've made in identifying these patterns.
Absolutely. You made a very good point, something that I just wrote about, I think it was yesterday, zooming out, right? We get caught up in the idea of looking at a single transaction and talking about the process flow, what information is available, the data sets, the 15.3 second hold time, the this and this and this. And when we look at one single example of a transaction or a fraud method that was deployed, we tend to get locked into those granular details as this one set. And there's plenty of service providers out there who are taking a zoom out approach, and they're looking at it across 10, 15,000 transactions across different industries. And you can put together something that becomes a behavioral model, which is exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's very powerful because, based on my previous experience, if I've found out that something worked at store A or at e-commerce platform A, I would attempt to go run that same process at platform B, at platform C, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And if across the board we're able to identify these bad behaviors or these behaviors that are indicative of navigating a website to get straight to a particular hot item, get it, put it in the box, copy and paste, all these behavioral elements go into play, you can begin to see when an organized attack is happening across your platform. You otherwise wouldn't be able to do that if you only took the singular granular approach only. You got to zoom out and look at the trends across the board. Great points. At this point, I want to invite everybody in attendance to throw any questions that you might have for Alex or I in the chat. Any questions, any thoughts? I just want to invite you guys to engage. With that, let's go ahead and talk about how identity theft is tying into the world of digital assets.
Yeah, so this is primarily in financial institutions and in crypto and NFTs. We haven't seen that yet done that. So we do see account takeovers, obviously, but account takeover is, I would say, a very niche interpretation of identity theft. So let's put that aside. What we are seeing in crypto exchanges and in financial institutions is we're seeing that it is becoming extremely easy to buy fully verified accounts on the dark web. Very, very easy. And when I say that, I mean if you go on the dark web and look for, for a crypto.com account, for a blockchain.com account, for a Binance account, for a Coinbase account, for a Chime account, for any of those, the going rates are somewhere between 50 and $150. And you get an account that is fully KYC verified, that you can operate and use and do whatever, whatever any rightful owner can do, completely free. The reason this has become so easy is because there are now, a different kind of fraudster or a criminal that actually uses legitimate individuals to create these accounts and buy them from them and then resell them on the dark web. And it is reasonable to do that only in the digital world. Because if you're trying to do that in the physical world, it's inscalable. There's no way you can hire 1,000 people, send them to go on a quest and open bank accounts in a scalable manner. You'd find yourself paying $1,000 for an account just to pay for their time, because they're not going to be successful on every account they try. They're going to be successful on one of 20. When they do that online on one of 20, they do an account an hour. You pay them $20 if pay them $20 for them, $20 an hour if they people that live in Eastern Europe or in Africa or in some of the countries in Southeast Asia. $20, $200 a day, that's a monthly salary. They're very happy with that. They can easily do that because they have the right documentation. It's real. And then when someone uses that somewhere else, it's very easy to show it wasn't them, right? It definitely wasn't them that did that. So they're not exposed in any way. So you're seeing that very scalable pattern of creating these accounts very cheaply and then reselling them again from a fraudster perspective for a very cheap price. Right? They can now sell them for $50 or $100. There's no reason, for a fraudster not to invest $50 to $100 in an account that is KYC verified, that it can go on the crypto exchange, do one transaction for $3,000, be gone, right? Because once you've gone through KYC, there's no reason why anyone would prevent you from doing that, and you created 60 times ROI on every account you got. You do that a few times a day, you're pretty well off. And that's what we're seeing them do. And, our numbers, the numbers we're seeing are staggering. For us, we have a number of clients in the crypto and NFT domain. And what we're seeing there is that 77%, roughly 77% of the fraud that does go through, the payment fraud that does go through, comes from fully verified KYC accounts, which is staggering when you think about it. But when you realize that, guys, the KYC doesn't help, right? You can do that, or you have to do that when regulation requires it, right? So okay, yeah, you have to do that when regulation requires it. Don't do that when it's not necessary. And what we're seeing today is more and more crypto exchanges believing that this is helpful from a fraud prevention perspective, and therefore they're KYCing every account. Why regulation, for instance, in the US, you don't have to KYC anyone that's not transacting for more than $3,000 a day. You don't have to. In Europe, the number is roughly 2,500 euros. Not roughly, it's 2,500 euros, but it depends on different countries on if it's per month or per year or whatever. Again, if someone's buying, if someone is going on the exchange and is buying for 200 euros, there's no reason to go through KYC. Go through KYC when it passes that limit that requires you that from a regulatory perspective. And then, then you're covered from an AML perspective. You're doing the right thing. Doing that, assuming that it's helpful in fraud prevention from a payment fraud perspective, from our experience, at least, it's simply wrong. The only thing it does is it verifies you're going to do more and more false positives, meaning decline legitimate, or, enhance the friction for legitimate customers that would simply go elsewhere.
I think that's a really good point when we're talking about the combination of digital assets and compromised identity information, especially in the landscape of 2022 right now with all these data breaches that are happening. We just got big news that I won't name them, but a big breach happened, within the last week. 2 big breaches did actually, where social security numbers and driver's licenses were all compromised. I say this often. I predict that, fraudsters are going to become more savvy with the ways that they employ all of this available identity information. And these things that you're talking about, it's almost like a perfect storm. Not only is it instant deliverables, it's digital, and then there's marketplaces that the fraudsters can flood marketplaces, and then you can sell off mule accounts and all of these different things, all centered around identity information. And when you consider how much of the identity information is available on the black market, it becomes pretty scary. I think that I love the fact that you were talking about how KYC verifications and the nuances of it based on different industries with different regulations. I love how you were touching on that, especially because traditionally PII KYC is something that everybody jumps straight to. It's a holistic data set. It can be applied at every touch point. It's a good go-to for traditional fraud prevention. But I do love to see that in this new dynamic that's emerging, not new dynamic, but this dynamic that we're speaking about, we start to see the limitations, which brings me to a question that Katerina submitted. She asked, can you please describe in a simplified way the best possible mixture of prevention mechanisms against digital assets fraud? Yeah. So what data sets, what technology? We spoke about moving on from PII and KYC. We've spoke to adopting behavioral analytics, that'd be under biometrics. And then I think session data was something that we wanted to touch on. So go right ahead.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, there's no silver bullet, right? There's no silver bullet. I remember the time when, at the time they were called Email Age, right? They came out with this feature of Email Age, and everybody thought, that's the silver bullet. And obviously it's no longer the case. Obviously it's no longer sitting in the dark in the corner suits you, Alex.
Right.
So sorry. So it's there's no silver bullet. It's really about the holistic nature of the data you're looking at. The more data you have, the better. There's no question about that, right? Our models are as robust as the data we rely on, but it is very important to select the right types of data. The reason I'm saying that is because in these type of industries, we need immediate reaction. We need immediate reaction, meaning we need very, very short time for decisions, right? You cannot take a decision 3 seconds later because the person is going to be gone. Right? Mm-hmm. We provide decisions today in 300 milliseconds, and that's kind of the standard on the market, right? If you do that for longer as part of the checkout process, it just doesn't work. And when it's in e-commerce, it really doesn't matter, right? Because if you stop the delivery 2 days later, you're still fine. You can take the decision 2 days later. Here, you have to take the decision, during the checkout process. If you want to provide a frictionless experience, if you want to do that, you have to rely not only on vast amounts of data, but to really engineer it well and find the right pieces that you want to rely on an ongoing basis so that you can make a decision in 300 milliseconds. And that is what it makes it so complicated. Because if you're relying on all of this and you're buying and you're building a model, a machine learning model, we haven't used the term machine learning, but obviously, that's the underlying technology, I think, today for most of the tools out there that are looking at behavioral analytics. If you're going to use tens of thousands of features in your model on an ongoing basis, you're not going to get decisions in 300 milliseconds. You have to find a way to reduct it in the right manner. And that's, part of the secret sauce, I think, for everybody. Looking at these different elements and identifying the right combination of that is not easy. And what we found, by the way, that works really well is that it has to be tailor-made for every, not even for every merchant, but for every, I would say for every site, for every service. Right? So even if you have a merchant that has, a number of sites, you need a different model for each and tailor it. So if you're looking at, at every mouse movement, every keystroke, every gesture that happens on the screen, if you're doing that, you will be more successful if you're tracking user sessions and behaviors dedicated on a per site. And if you're asking what's the biggest, I would say, effort here is to really find a way to do that well And for us to do that in a scalable manner is probably the one thing that we invest in most heavily on the R&D side, right? Being able to create these models, bespoke models for every different merchant, for every different site, specifically to get to that level of accuracy. So I know it's a long answer for a short question, but if I take it back, then use vast amounts of data, identify what works specifically for you, and build that into your models. Primarily use behavioral analytics, and always use that on top of using basic contextual and PII information.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, the behavioral analytics is going to be very important, and then to drill down on the idea of we understand that these digital assets are transacting immediately. It's immediate delivery. So getting that actionable determination as quickly as possible. You said you operate within 300 milliseconds. That's super impressive. Great stuff, and it's very important in this realm. Good stuff. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Oh, wow. A lot came in. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Recently I had someone talk about Nespresso fraud. eBay marketplace stores offered discounts on Nespresso sleeves, then took those purchases and used the newly acquired credentials to purchase the sleeves and additional items from Nespresso directly, then send the eBay triangulation fraud. Yeah, that's what we're talking about here. How does Alex believe this is happening? What is Nespresso missing? Okay, so that's the question, is digital assets as it applies to triangulation fraud, which for everybody in attendance, it's effectively a black market variation of dropshipping, right? So what would happen is, in a high level, you have a fraudster who establishes a marketplace profile somewhere claiming to sell items A through Z. They just load the pictures. They don't actually hold the inventory. They sell it at a price that's below MSRP, the suggested retail price, and they get a lot of sales. Well, they take the dollars and cents from that, and then they go directly to the brand. So if they're selling shoes, they'll go straight to a shoe company and use stolen payment credentials in order to place the order there and use the shipping address from the initial order to effectively get that item to that person. So that's what triangulation fraud is. I believe that's what Colin was discussing here. Alex, yeah, go ahead and tell us how it's affecting digital assets.
Yeah, so we're seeing three-party, right? The triangulation here is the fact that there are three-party. There's the legitimate owner of there's an unsuspecting consumer. There's the fraudster in the middle, and then there's the brand or the merchant, right? That's where we're seeing these patterns emerge. We're seeing triangulation fraud. We're seeing in even services like Uber. And that's a conversation we've had with some of the people at Uber. Triangulation fraud there was something that has been devastating for years. I assume that's what happens today with Nespresso. If the person that is asking specifically about that, and it works exactly as you've mentioned, right? It's fraudsters that are using false credentials, false payment methods, or stolen payment methods to acquire the goods, send them to someone that is legitimate, that believes he actually bought the right goods, and then eventually someone is left out of pocket. Normally it would be Nespresso, and that's what we're seeing. The same thing happens in the digital world. The thing is, in the digital world, you don't necessarily need to do that. Because it is delivered immediately, you don't need to have another person that is expecting to receive that the products really are shipped to, that there's like a drop shipping scheme. You don't need all of that. You just skip all of that, receive the goods immediately, and then are able to resell them. You don't need another site in between to create that. It's more work. I would say that the most prevailing pattern that we've seen that happens to use something like that is in travel. Primarily for last minute, and there it works in a pattern like this. So let's say, Alex, you want to go to London tonight, right? And I'm saying tonight because if you're trying to do that in 3 weeks, then it's going to be much more difficult to create damage that way. But if you want to do this for tonight, you're going to go online, you're going to look for for a ticket, and you're going to find that there's a United ticket, let's say for $1,500. And then you see that there is another site that's called, let's say, Alex Travel Incorporated, and he offers the same thing for, as you said, lower than MSRP, right? So not 1,500, but 1,300. And then you're saying, oh, great, I got this site probably acquired a bulk of tickets, ahead of time. I'm looking for a flight tonight. So he's selling it at a discount from the current price. So you'll pay him the 1,300. What will happen actually is that the fraudster would get the payment information, because what would happen? You would provide that site your actual information, right? You'll tell them that your name is Alexander. You'll give them your right address. You'll give them the right passport number, right? Because you're looking for a real plane ticket. They'll use all of that. They'll place an order with United for $1,500 using a stolen payment instrument, because $1,500 is what the cost of a ticket is. But they will use the information you provided, your name, your address, your passport information. They'll get the ticket in an email. They'll provide the ticket back to you, right, to the person that have made the purchase, and then they're gone, right? The site is gone. A day later, there's no site anymore. You've already traveled, and then 3 days later, the rightful owner of the card is calling United, telling them, or not United, his issuer, telling them, guys, I didn't go on a flight to London. You see here, I'm here in the States. I haven't gone there, so please give me my money back. And then United's going to be out of pocket. And that's the exact piece that an espresso is missing, and trying to create a situation where you're matching the addresses and trying to match the address for the credit card and all of that just creates more false positives. Especially in the travel industry, it's impossible to, or at least it's not practical to create a situation where the person that buys the tickets is the person that flies, because that kills all of business travel immediately. So the situation is very complicated. We're seeing, I think that one of the biggest attacks in this market in airlines has happened a few years back, and cost one of the major airlines. Again, I won't mention names, but cost one of the major airlines, I think, damage in almost $1 million, slightly below $1 million in 24 hours.
Holy cow!
And the guys were gone immediately. And it created, because it was $1 million, it was enough for the FBI to start investigating. And I think that, they tracked them somewhere, in Southeast Asia. They never got their hands on them.
Jeez. Yeah, that's insane. And that introduces a new element here. When it comes to representments and chargeback representments, how is the chargeback process affected relative to physical goods with shipping and instant deliverables?
Yeah, so what we're seeing there is that, first of all, let's put fraud and service-related chargebacks apart, right? Because when it's service-related chargebacks are easier to fight in the digital world, because it's very difficult to say I did not receive the goods, right? Or the goods have been delivered. The goods are not as they're described, because if you're getting a code for a game in Xbox, it could be that it's not working. That could happen. But you're getting a code. It's not like you're getting something that's broken, or the packaging was misplaced or whatever. It never happens. Same on the delivery, right? You sent it to an email. You have confirmation that the email was received. There's not a lot that can happen there. So on service related, we're seeing a much higher success rate on representment for digital goods. On the fraud side, it's very similar. And there, I think that the only fraud that we're seeing that has any success rate in representment is what we call liar buyer, right, or buyer's remorse, right? It's when it's not my name, right? I think it's an industry
I like
kind
it.
of terminology, and it means that whoever's acquired whatever product this is, has either decided he didn't really care for that, he didn't really want that, or he's saying, I bought it, but I didn't really buy it. And then in these cases where you have enough of a proof, you can fight these chargebacks and win. If it's real fraud, from our experience, it's done, right? You never get your hands back on the money. It's not worth fighting.
I think it's really interesting to think about the different types of representment data that might come from social media. That might come, because we're talking about esports, we're talking about video games, we're talking about things that people post about reliably. So say, for example, someone that's employing friendly fraud against a Steam account purchase, and they're saying, oh, I never paid for this game, yet they're streaming it, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So there's a lot of research that can be done, and a lot of new data elements that are coming into play with these instant deliverables. That's really good stuff. That's really crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think we covered everything that we wanted to, unless you have something else, something more that you want to cover.
No, I'm good.
Oh, we saw that was social engineering. That was one thing that I wanted to dive into. Social engineering in the world of digital assets. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, so I think social engineering, again, for the sake of everyone on online here, social engineering is what happens when fraudsters persuade unsuspecting consumers to do something they shouldn't be doing. Right? They get them to do stuff that doesn't make sense. And they employ whatever methods in their power to do that, and it starts with very simple methods, such as you get an email coming from your boss, or at least looks like it's coming from your boss, telling you, "Hey, I'm in a meeting. I cannot step out. I need to buy a gift for someone. Can you please buy an Amazon gift card and just send it over, and I'll use that." And people, for some reason that is difficult to explain, would go buy their gift card and send him the number, right? Not realizing that that they've just lost $100. So we're seeing different patterns of social engineering. Now, what's important to understand about social engineering is that even though a big piece of it can be done by machines, if you want to do it well, eventually you'll need human intervention. And because of that, it's really reasonable to do only when there's enough of an incentive. So you will see that happening on crypto. We see a lot of that in crypto. You will see that happening on prepaid debit cards. You will see that happening on very liquid gift cards. The amount of social engineering, let's say, on game codes for Xbox, that average at $5 to $10, not a lot. It's not worth the investment. But when you're selling something digital that has a significant value in its liquidity, that's when you see social engineering emerge. And social engineering takes place in different channels. It could be an email, it could be Twitter, it could be reach out on Facebook Messenger. Anything goes. Anything goes. And the conversations could be, there could be 10 exchanges before you decide to trust them.
Of course. So it's the same scam mentality that's being applied to digital assets, game codes, gift cards, things like that. It's the same scam mentality that's being applied, and it's being targeted here in the digital space. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good to know. That's great to know. For everybody who's watching this, I think we're coming up on time, so this is the last opportunity to pop in some questions, any commentary. Let's see what we got here. It doesn't look like anything new has come in. Yeah, I want to invite everybody to take advantage of that nice little QR code there and schedule a demo with our friends over at nSure. Other than that, everybody, I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.